Okay, in this short module, we are going to cover how to programmatically authenticate automatically, for that matter, to Cisco FSO APIs. After completing this module as a DevOps or NetOps engineer, you will know how to programmatically authenticate to Intersight App Dynamics and Thousand Eyes APIs. We are going to start out with Intersight today. Now, Intersight uses an API key ID and an SSH key. We're going to add these to our vault, and then we're going to execute a task which will utilize the Intersight authentication Python module, and which uses the Python request module, and authenticate to the API and return some JSON for us. Each of the HTTP requests for Intersight is actually cryptographically signed using a SHA-256. So let's go ahead, and I have already logged in to the Intersight console, and I have actually already, from account administration API keys, I have already generated an API key. And when I generated this, it generated an SSH key for me as well. And I have already added it to my vault. So if I were to go here and log into my vault, log in really quick here. We'll see that under Cisco FSO Labs, under Intersight, for the V2 API, I have entered in the key ID, which I generated from the GUI, as well as the SSH private key, which I generated for the GUI. All right. Let's actually go ahead and go into our tasks folder. So what we're going to do now is we're going to run a task. So I am currently in the Intersight, lab tasks, Intersight input directory. And in here I have a task called Intersight task. I'm going to execute this. What it's going to do is, let's just go ahead and execute it. It is going to utilize a Python module that was written by a Cisco employee here, Brian Moore, with a slight modification. And it is going to programmatically pass in the key and the key ID from the vault, and it's going to do some work against the API and return back for us a JSON response. So let's, again, when we launch a task, what it's doing, it's an ephemeral build container. So it's like a bubble. It only exists for the duration that it builds the code, and if it's successful, it disappears. So it's very cost effective and efficient. So it's going out, it's grabbing, and in this case, I haven't yet built a custom OCI container for Intersight. I'm just using my apt. And then when I launch my shell script, essentially what it's doing is doing a pip install of this Intersight Python module and another module called cryptography. Oh, I see my task completed. Then what it's doing is it is passing in the key ID from the vault, and also it is grabbing that SSH key, writing it to a file on our build container, and then it's executing this physical summaries v2. Let's take a look at this. So this script is actually importing that module Brian wrote, which is essentially a request wrapper. And so we're importing Brian's module here, and then we are calling in the environmental variables from our build container from Vault. And then essentially we're just executing a query, which is going to give us the compute physical summaries off of the Intersight API. And we can see that it already built and ran, and it brought back from us a nice JSON response. This module can be reused with no changes. So if you go to the README, it will show you where to download this module. And if you want to run queries against different Intersight API URLs, all you need to do is update this URL. That's all you need to do. So now you have a methodology to programmatically authenticate against the API. You can also rotate the API keys in the backend. Your scripts aren't going to care because it's calling Vault every single time to get those values and passing them in as variables. All right, so that covers how to automate programmatic authentication to the inner site API. Now, let's move along to AppD. AppD is very different. So if we log into the AppD console, the first thing we have to do is go to the gear, and we have to go to administration, API clients. And we have to add in anything that has an email address here. We have to give it the account owner role. And then what we have to do is click on generate secret, which I've already done, and save. Very important to hit save here. You only get one opportunity to copy this secret. I have already copied it to my vault under AppD secret. Here it is. So it's ready to go. After this, I am ready to roll with my automation task for AppD. So let's go ahead and we're going to change into the AppD directory, API, auth, and input. So I'm just going to cd into that directory. All right. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to execute my task. Now, the first thing that we're going to do in AppD is our get token task. That is actually going to go out and it is going to, let's take a look at it here. Let's read it. So we're just using Python requests here, and we're gonna disable the SSL or the TLS warnings. So here is where we are passing in the environmental variable that was injected into the build container from Vault, and we're appending it to our payload here. And then essentially what this is gonna do, this is calling out to authenticating to the AppD API with our secret from Vault, and it is requesting that it generate for us a temporary token. That token we are writing to the Vault, and then we're going to call it in subsequent code. So let's go ahead and run this first. Let's see, arrow app, API, that was nice. Let's go back up to AppD get token. Okay, enter. And if you notice on my task here, I'm using CEX. That's why we're seeing all this detail. If I didn't want to see it, I could just remove this here. So it went out, it authenticated, it got our token, and it wrote it to the vault. We got a 204, so it was successful. So now what we're going to do is that token is written to the vault. We are going to run another task, which is going to call out, get that token, and use it to do some work. And we are going to use that token to actually go out to the API and grab a list of the current latest beta agent versions. So let's go ahead and do that. Arrow up, and instead of AppD get token, I'm going to do AppD use token. All right, and it's done. And so what it did was it called in from the vault that temporary token, and it converted it to a string. That's how the API wants to receive it. And then it made the API call with that token, and it brought back our JSON response. Now, the nice thing again about using calling in the values of our token variables from the vault is that we can rotate them on the fly, or every use for that matter. We don't care because everything is a variable in our code. So we have nothing hard coded. All right, now let's move on to Thousand Eyes. Now Thousand Eyes again is very different. When we log into Thousand Eyes, we want to go over, let me just make this bigger. First thing we're going to do is go to users and roles. And then we are going to actually generate a token. I've already done this. I have written it, I have saved it to my vault. So here, TP API, it's right here. Okay, so this is all we need for Thousand Eyes. All right, now that we have that, let's change into our Thousand Eyes directory in our lab tasks. So we're going to go into Thousand Eyes, and we're going to go into the Thousand Eyes API input. Let's change into that directory quick. All right. And in this directory, we are going to run our TE API task. It's calling our TE API SH. It's doing a pip install of requests on the container, and then it's running this TE API get agent. So we're going to get a list of all the Thousand Eyes agents. Let's just take a quick look at this Python script. All right. So this one is actually not using requests, it's using check output. So it's best to use requests, but in this one, we're using check output. It's just another way of passing the commands through to the API. And then it's gonna bring back from us a JSON response, and we've already written in the filter here to look for enterprise agents and give us a list of the agent IDs. The main point here is that it's actually going out to the vault, and it's passing in the token to the build container. The build container, Python's getting it from the build container via environmental variable. And as you can see here, it's appending it to the, we're actually using a curl command here, and we're passing it through check output. Again, I believe I have another version of this, which is actually going to use requests. So let's go ahead and actually, my apologies, we'll run this one. It's going to the same SH file. So let's just arrow up here. All right, so let's go ahead and hit enter. It's just building our ephemeral build container. It's going to run our code on the container, and if successful, the container is just going to disappear like a bubble and be garbage collected. Now, if we did have an error, the container would hang around for a little while, and we could intercept onto it and do some debugging. But I'm pretty confident this is going to succeed, so we'll just let it run. And again, really the complexity in working with these APIs is that JSON comes back in a different format for all three. So we're going to be going over some techniques in Python on how to extract out of the JSON output the specific values that you want. So here it was successful, and here we have a list of agent IDs. So in summary, what we have learned and provided for you is reusable code that you can use to programmatically authenticate all three of these APIs securely, passing in values via your vault. And just to recap, benefits of API authentication, well, they're pretty obvious, but there's no shared secret sent to an API, thereby reducing the risk of compromising user credentials. A user can generate separate API keys for each client application, but make sure you check with the API documentation on the max number of API keys, because there is a limit. So for example, in Intersite per role, there's a number 3, but you can rotate them all the time. The API key allows you to monitor the application's API usage. The API usage and audit logs can be traced to individual client applications. And when an API key is compromised, it can be revoked without affecting other client applications and without compromising the user credentials. And each API key can be assigned specific roles and privileges, at least in Intersite. So now you are fully enabled with code to automate programmatically your authentication through to these APIs, and this reduces complexity for you. It gets you up and running so you can immediately start developing code to these APIs in your own CI tool. Thank you for watching.